I think self-acceptance is a pretty decent ideal to strive for. If you can get rid of that shame and fear, and just like accept yourself for who you are, kind of just opens life up a lot more.
Welcome to Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about living with communication differences. It is a production of the Communication Collaborative and is in solidarity with the Newfoundland and Labrador Stuttering Association. My name is Greg O'Grady. I am a person who stutters and your host. Some Stutter Law is a unique opportunity for us to discuss topics, experiences, and perspectives on what it is like to live with communication differences, to live with a disability, but also to uplift and inspire, to rebuild confidence through inclusive language and themes, and to instill hope by dismantling myths, stigma, stereotypes, and barriers surrounding speech, language, and disability challenges. Some Stutter Law is a safe space to speak and to own your truth, a safe space to communicate differently without the fear of being judged or feeling shame. If you only get one thing from this podcast, we hope it's this. It's okay to stutter and it's okay to communicate differently. It's not how we communicate that's important, it's the message that's important. So let's communicate differently without the need to ask permission or to apologize for being you. For more information about the Communication Collaborative or this podcast, you can find us at somestutterlaw.ca. Today, Some Stutter Law would like to welcome back Chad Feehan. Welcome, Chad.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you very much, Chad. So just a little bit about Chad. Chad is a musician, artist, journalist, and a photographer living in St. John's, Newfoundland. Chad was born and raised in the area and currently divides his time between his partner, cats, family, and artistic projects. Chad, I'm sure that these interests brings you joy.
Yeah.
Chad is also a person who stutters. When Some Stutter Law podcast was launched in 2021, Chad was our second invited guest. Chad's conversation was posted on March 28, 2021. Can you imagine, Chad, how fast time flies?
It feels like it was just a year ago, but apparently it was 2 years.
2 years, I know. So the Some Stutter Law felt it was time to invite Chad back for a catch-up conversation. Before we start, Chad, you recently completed a short video story for your journalistic studies at Memorial University about a person who stutters and this individual experience as a linguist with a stutter and the relationship between those two aspects of their life. And also, again, Chad, thank you for inviting me to participate in this project. Can you share a little bit about this story with our listeners?
Yeah, well, I'm in CNA, and so Liz has been a friend of mine for many years now, and they've become more and more of an inspiring person to me as I've watched them grow and develop their interests and passions. And I thought a story about somebody who enters the field of linguistics as a person who stutters is a particularly inspiring tale. And they had so many interesting takes on it, and I wish I could have fit it all into the 2 minute time frame because there was so much there. Yeah, it was a great conversation with both Liz and yourself.
Thank you, Chad. Chad, could you share a little bit more about what Liz said about identities? You shared something about identities.
I don't think I can accurately speak from memory on that. I don't know if I could accurately represent what they said about identity, and I don't really want to speak for them either because they would really say it a lot more eloquently and accurately than any attempt that I could make. But I guess generally, the subject and like notion of identity is a very strong presence in their life, and it interweaves in through the various things.
Thank you. Thank you.
And stuttering is certainly a part of that, and that's probably all I can say on
it. Chad, when we're talking about identity, in my introduction, I always make sure now that I introduce myself as a person who stutters because I've lived my life so many years, yesteryears. It wasn't that long ago, of course, that I've always been a covert person who stutters. So I hid my stuttering at all costs, which unfortunately causes even more problems for when we were comparing to. Well, I guess we can't compare, but still, it's more as trying to hide your stuttering so much causes more emotional, psychological stress. So this is why I say that I'm Greg O'Grady. I'm a person who stutters. So I identify as a person who stutters. What are your thoughts about that? Like self-identifying.
Yeah, I think anything that alleviates your internal stress about it, that's a great. Because I know for a lot of us, and certainly myself, it's the stress that it's the stress and the anxiety that perpetuates weights it. So I've recently started, I guess, doing that similar sort of thing. Only, and I guess in more specific circumstances. So, for journalism, I have to speak to. I have to speak to different people uh, all the time, and generally the act of speaking to a new person is always a stressful thing because you because as a person who stutters, I had to actively struggle to a new person. Um, so what I've recently started to do is in my opening emails, because I generally open dialogue over email. I'll say stutter, have some patience, and will be fine. I haven't really made that introduction in person yet. I feel like they just get the message pretty quickly, but I find doing it over email does alleviate a lot of that stress. And then, because I find that it's predominantly the stress and anxiety that cause my disfluency. If I'm not stressed, I don't stutter at all. It's something I've known for a long time. Yeah.
Chad, would you be able to elaborate on what I guess circumstances causes you? What are the triggers that cause you to feel stress and disfluent?
Um, I guess the acts of stuttering and struggling with fluency is like it's an inherently vulnerable state, and I don't like to do that in front of anyone really. There's a lot of like different like anxious thoughts that float around uh, in the period leading up to a speaking scenario, and during it, kind of hard to in them all down. Say like let's say I'm a flurry of negative stuff. Recently, I found that a prominent One is the act of not wanting to stutter, or like the act of wanting to be fluent, or certain people. Major example is my partner. I would like to be fluent for my partner. That puts pressure on me, which then instigates anxiety and therefore stuttering. So if it's my theory that if that internal pressure or desire to be some other certain way other than what I am, it would cease to bring itself out. So it's like the desire to not do the thing brings about the thing in some like weird like self-fulfilling irony.
Chad, I appreciate when you said that you dislike feeling vulnerable, because as a person who stutters as well, I mean, no one likes to feel vulnerable because you feel so insecure and lacking and not confident. And you see, and with a person who stutters, feeling vulnerable, I always apply to, I mean, based on my years of experiences, I'm not too sure what it feels like to feel confident and to feel empowered. However, as a person who stutters, I sure know what it feels like to be unempowered. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's definitely like lacking. There's a lack of confidence there, for sure. Because when you're trying to when you're at the counter of business, if you're trying to tell the dentist secretary or information, and it takes you like 2 minutes. Definitely abject feelings of powerless. It's a powerless is a pretty good word to describe that, because you're struggling with such a difficult with such a simple task.
Chad, you're also involved in a project with Dr. Paul Decker, and Paul, for our listeners that don't know, Dr. Decker is an associate professor of linguistics at Memorial University. And this is a research project that Paul is doing on call this communication. would you share with our listeners, Chad, what this video project is about? Because it really relates to feeling unempowered.
Yeah, so I did one interview for that about a year ago, I think, close to a year. And I think we've got the follow up interview coming up soon. I just don't really remember the details that well. I was basically telling my story and answering general questions in a similar manner as to what we're doing. But I think it's a great uh, documentary that I think it's going to reach a lot of people, and because I don't think it's an issue that a lot of people put a lot of the thought into, because I feel like generally there's so many different concerns in the world, and a lot of things just pass us by. So I think this is going to bring a lot of visibility to our community.
Mm-hmm. See, when Paul, when Paul started to discuss and introduce this project and this term, discommunication, we know what communication is, but this term is so unfamiliar, and it's really it is really applicable for people who stutter because it relates. I feel it relates to the stutter iceberg because we noticed Dr. Joseph Sheen's analogy of this stuttering when compared to the iceberg. 10% of the tip of the iceberg is the primary and secondary characteristic of stuttering, whereas the 90% below this is the emotional aspect of stuttering. The feelings of isolation, lack of self worth, lack of confidence, shame. And so this is a daily experience that most, if not all, people I feel experience on a daily basis. Whereas when I mean, this is what we internalize. But when we think about this communication, my understanding of it, Chad, is when we as people who stutter feel devalued. This this discriminated against. It adds to the layers of the below the surface of the iceberg. So that adds another layer to our feelings of lack of self worth, lack of confidence, and these feelings of feeling vulnerable. What are your thoughts about that?
I think I think for me, most of my experience with those notions, I think for me, they kind of come more from within rather than from the external world. I don't really feel I don't really feel persecuted by society. I feel most of the pressure, most of that sort of thing is like an internal thing. Um, but I do obviously agree with the iceberg that like of most of the, I guess, phenomena of stuttering for me is like an emotional logical thing, which I don't think gets I don't think it gets as much attention as it does in like the speech like therapy world. I mean, I went through uh, years of speech therapy in the 90s up till I guess the mid to the thousands here and there, and then like brief periods of it in recent years, and there was never like an emotional psychological um, component, which would have been really helpful as a kid because that just would have helped because I didn't even know what I didn't even know what anxiety was until I was 18. I didn't really have the words to describe what I was feeling until I guess did a bunch of self reflection, and I think I went to a therapist, and he said what you're describing is anxiety, and I was like, oh, that's what that is, and then it really contextualized contextualized my entire childhood because I realized, yeah, I was racked with anxiety constantly as a child for years, and nobody told me. Like I had no one to explain to me what these feelings were and why I felt them, and I guess how it relates to stuttering. There was, to my memory, there was absolutely none of that. I think, I think if we don't address those issues with kids who stutter, we're outright failing them.
Chad, when you talk about anxiety, for Chad, what is what is your definition of anxiety, or what are the symptoms? Because I often ask myself the same question. It's difficult to explain what anxiety is, but for somebody who has experienced it, it's just all these sensations, all these feelings, the tingling, the foggy head. I mean, that's how I describe it. How do you describe it?
Fear, dread, ner- 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 nervousness, um, extreme apprehension, aversion. I mean, just very, very strong pointed fear. Um, like classic example. You start a new school year in like grade school, and the teacher goes around the room, and everyone introduces themselves, and says a bit about themselves. And as a person who stutters, you're just quaking in your seat, absolutely petrified, just so afraid. Like there you wouldn't know, but there was a killer in the hallway, like just so uh, petrified about having to say like 9 words to the class and take like 60 seconds to do it, and then the moment comes, and then you're struggling, and I liken it to, for me, stuttering is having like a little panic attack, and your brain is exploding. That's I think that's pretty like accurate representation.
You see, I've read that. I mean, one of the authors I've read who stutters explained it like simply by saying that anxiety is the fear of the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
whereas fear is something more tangible. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
afraid of dogs, you're afraid of cats, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That makes sense. So, it's just, but you're right, Chad, because it's the fear of the unknown. Like we're always on guard. There's this
Mm-hmm.
angst because we don't know what to expect, and given our history of having negative experiences, we always anticipate that. You know what I mean when we
Mm-hmm.
stutter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now, how's your anxiety level now? Compare, like, is it as intensive, or as you're getting older, you're exposing yourself to more speaking situation? Is it becoming less intensified? Is that a good word for it? Less intensity.
Ah, man, it's kind of hard to describe. It's definitely still there. I don't think it's any worse, to be honest. I think I'm just getting better at pushing through it out of necessity. It's like just trying to think of like an analogy. it's kind of like the burden is still the same, but you just get a little stronger at carrying it. Maybe it's like that. Like I had an interview the other day, and I was pretty fluent the entire time. It's significantly worse than this conversation. I just pushed through it, and you just do it. I'm not really interested in like limiting my like life options because I mean I've done that more often than I'd like to do, but you just kind of do it anyway, and then I mean after any like prolonged period of disfluency, it's like pretty emotionally exhausting because I mean you know you have to be like emotional exhaustion, but it's also physically exhausting too. Like you get really tense throat. Well, I get really tense throat and my jaw's all tense and my abdomen is tense. So you just take a breather after it and then just carry on. So I guess to answer your question, it hasn't super gotten any easier. I just do it anyway.
Chad, when you mentioned that you had taken speech therapy before, did has any of the speech targets been carried over with you? Like, for example, I took the Fluency Plus program at the Speech and Stuttering Institute in Toronto years ago, and I do refreshers, and it has helped me to manage my stuttering. I mean, I've gone beyond the need to be fluent because there's no such thing, I don't think. Fluency. I think the key is in treatment is to manage your stuttering, and so as you mentioned, the breathing helps. The breathing, the deep breathing. I'm trying to think of some of the other targets now. Helps a great deal. You know, the full articulatory movement, opening your mouth, things like that. You know. So has any of those targets continued with you?
Yeah, there's like a whole array of techniques that have been drilled into my uh, brain that I do oftenly, but not constantly try to enact. I find that a lot of the times in like real world scenarios that it's almost like the act of trying to meet these techniques sometimes is like more stressful than it would seem, and then the techniques just don't work, which is discouraging. Right now, for example, I'm not really using anything. I'm just kind of like riding a wave. I'm sure you're familiar with just ride. You're just like decently fluent for no reason, and you just kind of ride it. So I'm feeling pretty fluent right now, but I'm not really using any um, techniques per se. Like I'm just kind of coasting a wave of not being as anxious as I could. But yeah, I do try to do my, and like I do sometimes do relaxation techniques before I go into something. But I do find that also discouraging because a lot of the times I'll do a relaxation technique. Maybe I'll just do some deep breathing, and then I'll find I'm at a point of equanimity, and I'll feel confident, and I'll be like, okay, I'm feeling all right. I'm feeling like I can do this, and then I'll go into the speaking situation, and then the anxiety just peaks as if I had never done any of it. So that's discouraging, and that's why I think I don't do it as often as I should. And that's definitely not. I would not advise anyone to stop doing like known positive techniques because they feel like they don't work. I feel like with time and patience, these things do work.
Mm-hmm. You see, one size doesn't fit all because there's so many different types of speech therapy programs out there. For me, I feel I was very fortunate because, based on my history, I still consider myself a severe person who stutters. However, with the help of the Fluency Plus program, I'm able to manage it within reason, and I feel as I mean, this is Greg O'Grady speaking, Chad. That sometimes I feel I am my worst own enemy. I'm so critical of myself, and what I have to be careful of because I've had a history of being trying to mask my stuttering. Even now, Chad, I want to be fluent. I put a lot of pressure on me to be fluent, which negates uh, the whole premise of being open and honest. I stutter, and this is where I really have to concentrate on my speech targets and not to succumb to the emotional component. The need to be fluent, and I stutter. I stutter, and the reason why I'm taking the speech therapy of the program was to help to control my stuttering. Like I feel that any aspect, any way that we as people stutter can help minimize the anxiety, help with some degree of control. I think we really have to applaud ourselves. And when it all says and done, Chad, I feel it comes down to self acceptance, and that's a hard pill to swallow. Especially we're living in a society with so much emphasis placed on communication. And I often remember that when I was working, I had to go to meetings with other managers. I used to become so overwhelmed and bewildered because everybody's talking so quickly, and before I can get a word out edgewise, they're off to a new conversation. But I think when all said and done, we've got to be gentle with ourselves and we've got to be gentle with our minds and anything that we can do to help control. And that goes for speech therapy as well, You know? Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, that that's certainly echoes or mirrors how I feel. If I truly accepted my this 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 stutter, I feel like I would cease to stutter. I feel like if I truly found self acceptance in my stutter, and if I eradicated the desire to be fluent, I feel like I would just become fluent, which sounds crazy, but I feel that way. Like it sounds counterintuitive, but I feel like that's accurate because it's the desire to be fluent which causes anxiety, which causes this stuttering.
Mm-hmm. You see that that reminds me. I had a guest on some stutter law, and I can't remember who it was. It was one of the researchers, and it's a popular researcher within the stuttering community, and he said the same thing that you're saying, Chad. That once we accept on our stuttering, we may not we stutter less, or even may not even stutter. It's self
Mm-hmm.
acceptance, and you're right. We as people who stutter put so much emphasis on ourselves to to be fluent, and I admire people who stutter, and I've also had a few people who stutter on some stutter law who still stutter, but they're overt about it, and they classify themselves as confident people who stutter. And I mean
Mm-hmm.
that's quite the applause, you know. So that's for someone to say that yes, I stutter, but I'm a confident person who stutters. What are your thoughts?
I'd like to I'd like to get to that point. For sure, for sure. Or because I feel like I try to be a covert stutterer without thinking of it, and similar to what I said, it's I think it's trying to do it, trying to do it covertly is what makes it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I think for my case to be a confidence stutter would I think there'd be I think there would be more fluency in that ratio. And that's certainly something I could aspire
Mm-hmm.
to.
Chad, so since we had our last conversation, which was in March of 2021, where are you now in terms of your mental health acceptance? Because to be honest with you, since our last some sort of law, conversation, I feel that you've come a long way. I mean, you're more confident, you're more involved in life, and just thinking about how much you have accomplished so far. You're in journalism. You're an artist, musician. Do you feel you've come a long way since we've last chatted in 2021?
hard to. I think it's hard. I think for me, it's hard to conceptualize about what a want about what a long way would even mean for my circumstance. I'm definitely somewhere, and I'm definitely not in the same place as I was, but where that is, like uh, where I would plot that point on like the graph of life. I don't know. It's in the like in the like a 3D graph of life. It's somewhere. It's not where I was, but I wouldn't be able to tell you where it is. I know I've made accomplishments, and I know I recognize those accomplishments. I know I'm not as far in my accomplishments as I would have liked to be. So I think I had I think there were goals that I would have liked to have achieved, other than the ones that I have. Um, but just uh, they're just goals that I can set for the future.
I like, excuse me, Chad. I like the word accomplishments, and we as people started to go through some dark periods. Excuse me, some dark periods, and I find with what I do mentally is when I'm in a dark space or going towards a dark space, I always compare stuttering now to a dark rabbit hole. Okay, and it's so easy when I have a bad speaking experience or just a bad speaking situation to go in a dark hole of feeling the poor me, the stuttering mentality. But I find what I do now, Chad, I'm not too sure if this would help, that when I'm in this dark place and I'm heading towards that dark hole, I think of accomplishments. Well, what things I have accomplished that day or even that moment, and that sort of helps prevent me going to that dark rabbit hole. What are your thoughts?
I think that I think that's a great thing because we often I think we often don't count our blessings. I think it's easier to count our failures. Kind of like you're more likely to leave a negative review of a restaurant than a positive one, and I think we're the same way with our own selves.
Mm.
So I think if taking stock of things that can make you feel good, if that propels you through a dark period, then that's great.
Mm. Chad, I'm thinking as well now. Where are you now with your terms of your quality of life? is stuttering still holding you back, or you're pushing forward? And I sense that you really are moving, forging ahead. Do you feel you are?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if it's definitely holding me back less than in previous years. Going into journalism as someone who's stutters, that's hard. It's hard constantly. It's hard eh, 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 every day. But I think like the psychic torment of like not at least trying to do the things that you want to do would be would be worse.
Hmm.
Um, that would be. I think not at least trying to have gone into a field that I cared about because of something that I felt was holding me back. That would be like a super, like a potent, like purgatorial torment that would be worse than stuttering to strangers.
Well, it's just true. It's true, Chad. And I'm just just reminded of another analogy. I had a speech language pathologist as another guest, some sort of law. And I mean, just to be honest, I'm learning so much talking to guests as well. And this speech language pathologist introduced me to an analogy of a beach ball. And then I can't remember who you know who who the originator of this analogy is, but it makes so much sense. When we're playing with a beach ball in the water, for example, and we're trying to hold the beach ball, push the beach ball down into the water, is similar to our need to be fluent. You know how much time, how much energy, emotional, psychological energy it takes to push this beach ball in the water. It's almost like we're trying to hide and not accept our stuttering.
Sure.
And so I've also added to this pushing down the beach ball. It's pushing down the feelings below the surface of the iceberg, trying to avoid addressing them. And then the amount of energy that takes to do things like that. Your thoughts?
Well, I do really like the beach ball analogy because even if you manage to force the beach ball down, all the it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort and energy to keep it there, and it takes no energy to just leave it. But also, if you're using all of your energy to keep it down, and your hands hips, that ball is coming straight up, and it's going to go right into the air, and it'll be worse and it was gonna spoil on a splash, and you've essentially made a problem that wouldn't have been there if you had just left it.
Interesting perspective. You see, whereas with me, Chad, I feel that based on my history, I put so much emphasis to hide my stuttering, pushing that beach ball down. Whereas once I release the beach ball, it has so much potential now. I'm out in
Sure.
the open, so
Mm.
it minimizes the stress. What's in my best interest to keep pushing down my feelings and emotion, trying to hide my stuttering, or just releasing it all. So that's how
Sure.
I interpret it. You see,
Yeah.
yeah, this is
Yeah.
it. Chad, before we end now, I'm going to ask you one last question, and now let's not wait for another 2 years to chat, okay?
Sure. Yeah.
And do you have any final words for our listeners, especially for people who stutter?
I mean, I can only speak for my self here, but I think self acceptance is a pretty decent ideal to strive for. Because if you can get rid of that shame and fear, and just like accept yourself for who you are, kind of just opens life up a lot more, and it makes your life easier to just enjoy. Because not enjoying your life based on how fluent you are is it's not a good way to live. And I certainly empathize with that, and I have a long way to go for self acceptance as well. But I think it's a good ideal to strive for.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, compared to where I feel you were in 2021 and now, you really have come a long way. So, and you've also accomplished a lot. So remember the accomplishments. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So Chad, thanks a lot for being part of the Some Start a Law conversation. And as I mentioned, we'll have you back, but we're not going to wait for 2 more years.
Yeah, anytime you want me back, I'll jump right on in.
Okay. Thanks again, Chad. We will speak later. Bye.
Thank you. Enjoy your
You
day.
too. Bye.